This is Speaking of Pets podcast, where we give you up-to-date, accurate, science-based information when making decisions about your pet's health.
From experts in dermatology like my sister, surgery, internal medicine, CBD use in pets, the pet food industry, you name it. If it affects pets, we'll talk about it.
Today's Speaking of Pets podcast is sponsored by Blue Buffalo, the maker of natural pet foods. Love them like family, feed them like family. Blue Buffalo offers wholesome, meat-first recipes with high-quality natural ingredients in flavors dogs and cats love. Discover formulas for all breed sizes, life stages, and lifestyles. And with Blue Buffalo's True Blue Promise, that assures that real meat is the first ingredient, with no poultry byproducts, no corn, wheat, or soy, and no artificial flavors or preservatives. I'm Dr. Alice Jerome, a board-certified veterinary allergist and dermatologist, and...
I'm her sister, and I'm not a certified board dermatologist, whatever. I'm your average pet owner and lover. I love rescues, and we love to talk about pets, and I learn a lot from Alice. I feel like I get free, incredible vet advice. So what's going on, Al?
Hey, today, I just read that a pet food company put out another recall.
Oh, that seems to happen like every day.
I know, for listeria. But having said that, there are some pet food companies that don't even do quality control on their foods. So at least this company was checking. But what I think would be great is if we could get one of the experts from the pet food industry on the show so that we could rifle some questions at them.
That would be so helpful to me, because I'm sick of seeing the commercial on TV with the lady with the bag reading all the ingredients, and then the other lady in the aisle at the grocery store reading the ingredients, and they think because chicken's first, it's fabulous. And I don't know. I just give Libby what you tell me to give, because I trust you.
Well, and I agree with that. There are so many, like for example, the word organic with pet food has a different definition than organic for people food.
I didn't know that.
So, they use these terms, premium pet food. There's no definition of the word premium for pet food. So you can just use these adjectives willy-nilly and not really have to have any backup for it. But anyway, so today I have asked a pet food industry expert, Karen Labarre, who her background is way extensive in the pet food industry. She graduated from Iowa State, a great agricultural school, got a Bachelor of Science in Animal Science, and then went to work for a large animal feed company. Now, let alone pet foods, animal feed's a whole nother
like
planet.
Pigs and stuff like that.
You know what I'm saying? Oh my God, yes. So anyway, then after that, she went to work for Imes, which was back in the day, oh my gosh, just a lovely company. The employees that worked for Imes just loved their product. And then, of course, they were bought out by P&G, Procter & Gamble, who then sold them to another company. But now Karen is currently working for Blue Buffalo, and she's the regional manager of the southeastern portion of the United States. So I've asked her to come on, talk to us about recalls, talk to us about quality control, talk to us about what makes a good pet food company. Because as JQ Public, we don't know that. And as a veterinarian, all I can do is read what they send me. So I'm hoping that you have some good questions for her, and that our listeners have some good questions that they could submit to us via our email.
That would be great. Because honestly, Libby will eat anything, right? No matter what it is. So she's not going to be picky. But I want to make sure I'm feeding her the absolute best so that she's around a long time, right? And is healthy.
Absolutely. And I don't think that, I do know on prescription diets, because I'm familiar with those being a dermatologist. We use certain diets for food allergy and other ones to enhance the fatty acid content of the diet. But I don't think people know of all the research and the PhD nutritionists and the boarded nutritionists that work with these companies, at least the companies that have them. There are a lot of pet food companies that don't have nutritional advice behind them. So we've got a lot of questions for Karen, and I'm really looking forward to that segment.
Me too.
Hey, did you know that for dogs and cats that could benefit from a prescription diet, Blue Buffalo offers natural veterinary diets formulated by animal nutritionists and veterinarians for certain dietary needs like kidney support, weight management, gastrointestinal support, and my particular favorite, dermatology. They make a food allergic diet that's an alligator-based called NP or a hydrolyzed salmon-based for dogs and cats called HF. Contact your veterinarian about these prescription Blue Buffalo diets. I've got a question before you, Janet, because this always bothers me. We always think that pet foods that are made in the USA get all of their ingredients from the USA. Now, is that true, Karen?
No, it's not.
Oh,
And they can be manufactured here, but the ingredients can come from other places. Some of the trace minerals that we use in pet foods are not readily sourced in the US. You know, you can't get enough of them here. So things like turmeric, that comes from India. But you know,
oh,
good manufacturers check out their sources. They make sure that what they're getting is exactly what they ordered by
uh-huh.
testing the quality on the batches. Everything's labeled, it's traceable, things along that
Huh.
line. But it's just not feasible in this day and age to source everything from the U.S. Um,
Ah.
so
So if
So
it
is
says,
there like is how can I ask this? Does
well,
each
I'm
pet food
curious because if it
label?
says
Oh,
made
go
in
ahead.
the USA, then that's
Oh,
not necessarily true. There's
but
other stuff from a,
it could be
menu.
made in the US in a US factory, but that doesn't mean all the ingredients are only come from the
Come from.
USA.
okay.
So
Wow.
So is if I buy made in the USA, how many like factories are there? So does Iams have its own factory and Alpo have its own
well, there's
factory and
many manufacturing. So most of the major companies, the bigger companies, have their own manufacturing. At Blue Buffalo, we have two facilities that we own that make
Uh,
the majority of our food. But we also do a
oh,
combination of using other. They're called co-manufacturers, and the reason we
uh-huh.
do that is, you know, we may want to make a food that's high in meat and we need to
Okay.
have a specialized equipment, a twin screw extruder, to force that amount of meat into the kibble. But
Okay.
it's not something we're going to use a lot. So to invest the
okay.
money to have that equipment sitting idle for a long period of time. Treats is another example. You know, you get different shapes, you have different forms. You've got the jerky treats. You've got, we make most of our own treats now, but at some points we, you know, had a co-man making those for us. But you still are working, you have contracts with them, you
Hmm.
specify what you want as far as your ingredients, and most of the co-mans are very reputable. But
Hmm.
you know, there's just like anything else, there's variation, and depending on how much somebody wants to invest and pay
Mm-hmm.
for what they're getting, you know, that can vary. So
Hmm.
You know, I always have clients that would buy the pet food and then transfer it to a plastic container.
Oh,
And I was and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that the antioxidants or the omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids in there would leach out into that plastic. Aren't you supposed to keep the food in the original
you're
bag?
supposed to keep it in the original packaging, and really the good reason
Mm-hmm.
for that is on the packaging it's going to have the manufactured date and the best use by date. So if
True.
anything ever
good point.
happened and you needed to, you know, find out, say there's a recall and you want to say, oh, is that my lot? If you had
Yeah.
dumped it into a tub and threw
Yeah.
away the bag, you wouldn't know. So it's really good to keep it in the bag. And the bags are, you know, the quality of the bag does help the shelf life of the product. Once you open it,
Mm-hmm.
it's obviously you're going to
Yeah.
have air get in there and can degrade, but the shelf lives on the packaging take that into consideration.
Well, a couple of
I was
things there.
surprised
Wait,
to
but a couple of things there. Like our
okay.
bin is in the laundry room. It's visible, so it's like a metal bin. So it
Yeah.
looks nice. Plus, I have a chewer. So if I have the bag in there and I forget to close the laundry room door, it's going to be a disaster. So I could put my open bag in my cute
In your
container.
tin, right?
Okay.
That's what you're supposed to do.
I
Keep it
know, I
in the
just
bag.
learned that. I dump it in and throw the bag out, and then it takes you like a month to go through it and that bag is long gone. So
Right,
that's a
right.
really
Yeah.
that's really good to know. I didn't know that.
But I was surprised at how much I know I hate to use the word research, goes into the bag. I mean, to make sure that that food stays fresh in the bag. I had no idea. I thought you make pet food, you put it in a bag and you sell it. But they're like
Oh.
lined with like wax paper or something. What is that?
Well, it depends on the company, what kind of packaging they're using. But yeah, it's meant to be able to be airtight, so you're not going to have exposure and getting oxidation of the fats that are in the food. But yeah, it's not like a doing a recipe in your kitchen, say. There's lots of stuff that's involved, the testing of all the ingredients that come in. There's just hundreds of tests that are done to make sure that, when you empty that truck that's bringing in your chicken meal, that it's meeting the specs that it states that it's meeting, and that you're getting exactly what you want, because your formulas are fixed. At least ours are.
Yeah.
Not everybody's
Yeah.
are, but most companies have a fixed formula, meaning like they can't say, oh, I can't get chicken meal today, so I'm going to use animal, or beef or
Yeah.
some other ingredient. Your formulas, we stick to a specific formula, and you can't vary from there. So
Now that's interesting because who would know that? When I'm talking food allergy to owners, and the reason we recommend a prescription diet, like Blue Buffalo makes the HF, the hydrolyzed salmon, or they make the NP, the alligator. The reason we want them to use that is because we know those lines are tested to make sure there's no other protein contaminants. So then when the dog is doing well on the hypoallergenic prescription diet, the owners will go and say, well, he's doing great now, but I fed him chicken and he flared from chicken, so I know he can't eat chicken. So I'm going to go and read labels to make sure there's no chicken. But like you said, if they don't have a set formula, they may put chicken in that formula that day instead
it would
of
have to
beef.
be it would have to be listed as one of the ingredients on the packaging. They couldn't just
Okay,
substitute beef for chicken. But my
I
my point
see.
is, they could have, they could, like, instead of having chicken, maybe they have duck or turkey,
Okay,
because that's considered poultry.
I
So,
see. So it's something
so that's
close.
why,
Wow.
you want to make sure, you know exactly. And in the prescription diets like that, there's a lot of extra care that's taken, especially for dogs and cats that have food hypersensitivities. We do
Yeah.
a burnout where think of your self-cleaning oven.
Mm-hmm.
You turn it on to clean it. It goes to a
Mm-hmm.
super high temperature to get any kind of particles that are in that oven. It burns them out, and then you run a
Mm-hmm.
flush through it. And in a manufacturing, I mean, those kind of steps take time and they're labor intense. And when we make our prescription diets, we don't have anything else running. We only are running
Right.
HF. So if there's
Right.
another line next to it that would be running chicken, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have that, because that you could get minute particles in the air floating over into the other
Wow.
line, and then it's going to contaminate that food. And then on top of that, when the food's made, while it's
Mm-hmm.
being made, we are testing. We do ELISA tech testing. So we take
Mm-hmm.
samples from the beginning of the run, the middle of the run, the end of the run, and we send them out to test for chicken, egg, poultry, or I'm sorry, beef, to make sure that we
Yeah.
don't have any other proteins in
Yeah.
there. And until those tests come back, we
Mm-hmm.
don't release the products. We want to make sure that we know. And if it does come back that it has, say it does have beef in it,
Yeah.
what we would know from that is where it was taken in the run. So if it's in the beginning of the run, the clean out wasn't done properly. And
Wow.
so that way you can say to the people that are, you're working with that, say the plant, you can say it was the beginning of the run. So they missed a step. You need to go back over your quality control and make sure that this doesn't happen again. And the other thing to understand about co-mans is that, like, we have co-mans that make some of our vet diets. And
Mm-hmm.
so we don't own the product until it passes all the quality checks at the end. And so
Ah.
if that product comes back contaminated, they eat it. We don't purchase it from them.
Wow.
So,
So you can refuse it.
yes, yes.
Okay,
Now
but
that's
where
our
does that
contract.
go?
Not everybody can do
Does
that, but
so
our
could some
contract.
other
Yeah.
some other pet food brand could buy that?
No, no,
No, it's
Mm-mm.
no, we
disposed
wouldn't
of.
allow that.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah,
What's interesting to me is, all this quality control and testing that goes into it, the DNA testing to make sure there's no other extraneous proteins. And this is, Janet, we're talking about the food allergic diets, the
Right.
HF or the NP. Yet there are some pet food companies that have no quality control.
That's what I was going to ask. Is this a standard practice?
No.
well, it
And
varies. It varies. Now, I would say
okay.
there's all kinds of. I mean, most people are going to have quality control because they don't want to have product out there that's going to harm pets. So they're going to
Uh-huh.
do certain quality control. They may not do it to the extreme that we are,
Okay.
but there's
Okay.
variations. But I'd say most manufacturers are reputable. It's just that some companies choose to do more than others.
Different
Yeah.
standards.
And that's why there's such a variation in price. People say prescription diets are extremely expensive, but
Yeah.
a lot of the over-the-counter diets are just as expensive, and they
Yeah.
Oh,
aren't
I agree.
doing
Yeah.
that kind of scrutiny on those specific diets. So
I'm a big proponent of prescription diets because, as Dr. Raditic, who, as you know, is a nutritionist, has said, there's more research that goes into them and also a better omega-3, omega-6 ratio in them. And it's just more science behind them. And, these pets don't live long anyway. If I can do anything dietary wise and avoid medications to have my pet live longer, why wouldn't I do that?
right.
Talk
So,
to us about salmonella, though, because we hear a lot about that.
Yes.
What, like salmonella testing? How does it get? How does
In the food?
Like, what happens that
Well,
you
I
get
mean,
contamination?
just think about it. If you went to the grocery store and bought chicken and you put it on your cutting board and cut it, and tested that cutting board, you may come up with salmonella. It's in poultry. It's in a lot of meats. You can't get away with that. But
Right.
what you can do is you cook it to a certain temperature. So if there is salmonella, that's why it's important. You'll see a lot on packaging about make sure this is cooked at, 160
Oh, yeah.
degrees or, because that's when it's going to kill the salmonella. So we test for that. Now we test our ingredients coming in for that, and then we test
Ah.
it once the product's made. But there are times when, it gets out there. We see those recalls all the time. And really, a recall, people get all wigged out about a recall, but a recall in most cases is the company identifying, oops, we had a problem. We're going to go out and we're going to tell the public. It's called a voluntary recall. We're going to tell the
Okay.
public that, hey, this product, you don't want to feed it. Take it off your shelf, bring it back, or call the manufacturer. You'll get your money back. But really, what they're concerned about is not necessarily the dogs. Although if you have a compromised dog, it could be an issue. But it's really people coming in
Yeah.
contact with that.
Yeah.
Somebody that's
Yeah. Little babies, infants.
my daughter used to
Yeah.
eat the dog food all the time, I mean, she thought it was
It's-
funny. But older people, if you don't,
Yeah.
people don't think about it. They scoop out their pet food, but they don't wash their hands when they're done.
No,
Yeah.
they don't.
So,
You're right.
so that's really salmonella is, and salmonella is probably not the worst one. There's others out there. Some of the
Yeah.
mycotoxins from
Mycotoxins.
grains, can really be
Yeah.
deadly. And that's when you would have, something like that identified. You would have like the FDA may come in and say, okay, this is not a voluntary, it's a mandatory recall because it could compromise the health of some pets. So
Is
Remember
Mr.
that
Karen, is
happened
Mr.
years
Karen
ago?
pouring a cocktail?
no,
What?
Is
he's,
Mr. Karen pouring a cocktail?
uh,
Because I heard a.
Oh,
no.
hi, Mr.
Can
Labarre.
you cut that out? I'm recording.
Hey, I have a question. So you just mentioned mandatory versus voluntary.
Yep.
So there is a difference. Like, when does a mandatory get slapped on a company? When they don't want to do it voluntarily, or when dogs die,
if
or
whatever
what?
the thing is going to cause harm to pets. Too
Oh,
high a level
okay.
of vitamin D. That can
Yes.
be serious. If it's listeria, some of those really toxic things that may cause severe problems or even death. That's when it would be.
Oh, God.
That's when it would be.
So how does a company decide it's going to do a voluntary recall? Do they hear from pet owners that have given that food to their pets and the pets got sick?
Question.
or do they
Yeah.
Not
discover it because
necessarily.
they?
It's, like there's continuing testing going on, and it may have gone,
Uh,
like we hold our product for a certain amount of time before it's released to test it to
Oh,
make sure that, okay, even though it was manufactured on X date, we hold it for a certain amount of time to test it again to make sure that, it's not going to have salmonella or anything else wrong. Not every
right,
company does that. And so if it
right.
gets out there and like there's quality control like AFCO, they can go in and they can pull product off a shelf and test it. And if they find something, they can call the manufacturer and say, hey, we tested this lot code and we found salmonella. Then the company can issue a voluntary recall and have all that product taken off the shelf.
mm,
So how about it? Like, I see so many of these. I guess I'm going to call them like boutique um, dog food manufacturers. Are there
mhm.
restrictions like from the federal government, or
There are
could I just
definite
go out and?
guidelines. I mean, yeah, there are guidelines that you have to follow. Each state has certain guidelines that they have to follow. They have to register with the state. So I couldn't just
Oh,
like make up some food in my kitchen and bring it to the local pet store and sell it. It
okay.
has to have specific, guidelines and it's very regulated.
So Alice, as a veterinarian, I have several friends
You
who
just
make their own dog
float a little
food,
bit.
like rice and chicken or something like that, or they have the raw diet that they buy, or the
Mhm.
fresh food.
Mhm.
Is one better than the other?
Well, first of all, if you're cooking your own food, chances are 95% chance that pet isn't getting a nutritionally
Nutritious
adequate
diet.
diet. There are websites such as balanceit.com. There are vet schools, there are nutrition departments will for free formulate a diet for that pet. But someone, for example, an all meat diet is calcium deficient. You feed an all meat diet to a growing puppy, they'll get rickets, okay? They'll have bone
Oh,
deformities. So people think dogs are carnivores, so that's all they need to eat. No, they need carbohydrates. You need carbohydrates to formulate a proper stool, okay?
right.
That's just one of the things you need it for. Uh, Raw diets, big question. There's been no long-term studies. I mean, there are some companies now that are attempting long-term studies.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing there is let's process it so that it isn't going to get recalled because of salmonella, listeria, what have you. Uh, there are cases where they find that raw diets are more digestible than processed diets. But in my opinion, until we get long-term studies about those, I would rather go with a tried and
Very
true
true.
company that I see evidence-based studies on.
Sure.
So, cooking for your own pet, you might
Mm,
want to add cooked meat or egg or
yeah.
something to a prepared diet that is, commercially prepared diet. But no, as far as cooking for your pet, unless it's under the auspices of a veterinarian, no, you're not going to be hitting all the nutritional goals that you need for that pet.
Well, and how do you know as a pet owner that you're feeding your dog enough or your cat enough or not enough? Like I go with what's on the back of the bag according to her weight. Do you know what I
Karen,
mean?
you want to address that?
Yeah, I mean that those are guidelines, but it's just like
Mm-hmm.
people. We could all three of us could eat the same amount of food, and some of us would gain weight, some of us would lose weight. So it's just the way you metabolize. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're making sure that the pet isn't getting fat,
Yeah.
getting overweight, and you obviously bring it into the vet and get it weighed and checked and make sure that
Yeah.
it's healthy. But really, that's a starting point. I always say that's the starting point. The one thing I will say is when animals do become overweight, it's a lot of times because people are feeding, you get a cup, like a Tupperware cup, and you scoop it out. You're not feeding it by a measuring cup. And it's really good.
Right.
I had a 110-pound dog and I fed a half a cup. So if I was giving him a cup and a half in the morning, I fed 3 scoops, 3 half cups, because psychologically I felt like I've
Mm-hmm.
got this big dog. I want to give it 4 cups of food so I
Yes.
don't feel like I'm starving him. But and that's a
Yeah.
lot of why pets get fat, because people look at a little quarter cup and they go, "Oh, that's not very much." But really, if it's a small dog, they don't need a lot. But you
Yeah.
really want to make sure that you're measuring the correct amount and then
Mm-hmm.
adjusting it. And the other thing I would say, when you're cutting back food for a pet to
Mm-hmm.
lose weight, you're also cutting back nutrients. So if that diet is not specifically formulated for weight reduction, you really can be harming that pet by not giving it the proper amount of nutrients. So you want to make sure that you're feeding according to whatever the life stage of that pet is. So if it's a puppy, you want to feed it a puppy food because it's growing. It needs to have the right calcium and phosphorus to lay down bone. You don't want to get them too fat and their bones don't are
Yeah.
not able to support the weight. And then once it's an adult, you want to make sure that you're feeding it for the life. It's very active. If you have a border collie that's running around the backyard, you want to make sure that you're giving it enough nutrients. On the other hand, if you have a dog that's 7 years old and sitting on the couch and not really doing very much, you don't want to feed it a really active, high protein, high fat
Mm-hmm.
food because that's why they get fat. So you really want to do it according to their life stage.
And when do you go from like puppy to adult dog food? Like when it's X amount of
It
like a
depends
year
on the
old?
size of the breed, So if it's a small breed,
Oh,
so if it's something like 30 pounds or under 40 pounds, usually once it's a year old, it's an adult because it's come up, their bones have been
yeah.
formed and it's now considered an adult. When you have a large breed dog, usually we like to see people stay on a large breed formula till they're 18 to 24 months of age.
Huh.
Just because you want to make sure the bones are fully developed
Yeah.
before you switch them to the adult food, because the ratio of carbohydrates, protein, and fat are going to vary when you go from a puppy food to an adult food.
And what about if you're transitioning, like you want to try a new food or your vet suggests a new food? So how do you just change a matic like that one
No,
day?
no, that's like the worst thing you can do. And that's why people say, oh, my dog got diarrhea on that food, or,
Oh,
vomited. It may be really palatable and they really liked it, so they gobbled it up and then they threw it back up. Or if you
Yeah.
switch it that fast, you're going to have, you know, you've got to give the bacteria in the gut time to switch over. So if you're going from a formula that may have more, grains in it versus a higher meat formula, it's going to be different bacteria in that gut. So it's going to take 3 weeks for that gut to like really change over the bacteria. So you're not going to have any issues with the stool. So you really want to start slow, mix in a quarter of the new food for the first, 3 or 4 days. And then over the course of a week to 2 weeks, you can gradually, switch it to the new food.
new
And
food.
I'm being real idealistic. That's the perfect world. It doesn't always happen that way, but
Yeah.
you can try your best to try to make sure that even if you do half and half for a week, that you're given that gut time to roll over and get the right amount of nutrients. So
What about like picky eaters? Like say you get this really good food and they're just not interested. Like
yeah,
do you
I tell people to take it and put it in a plastic or, put it on a paper plate and put it in the microwave for like 20 or 30 seconds.
Oh,
And that pulls the fat to the surface and it makes it more enticing to the pet. You can also
interesting.
wet it and do that. You could get a little bit of canned food and slowly
Yeah.
mix a little bit of that in. A lot of people just want to feed dry food because it's easier, but sometimes if you get a really picky eater, it's nice to have a can to complement it. And most
Yeah.
diets have a can that goes along with the dry that they're feeding.
Interesting.
I'm always amazed at the different types of diets there are. Like,
Oh.
Karen, what's your experience? Like, there's different diets for bladder stones, there's different diets for mobility. I mean, tell us about that, about how diet can address a specific disease.
Well, there are a number of disease states that diet can address. Not everything can be addressed by diet alone, but pretty much, there's a lot of conditions. So, like kidney, if your dog is older and it goes into kidney failure, you want to feed it a kidney diet because it lowers the protein, so it has less stress on the kidney to work to process that food. And then it also has a lower phosphorus level. Phosphorus is known, if you reduce the amount of phosphorus, it's going to slow the progression of that disease down. So it's not going to progress as fast. Because typically, when you diagnose kidney, it's usually later stage, although there's a lot of
Yeah.
new tests out that are picking it up
Yeah.
sooner, which is wonderful,
Yes.
because there are a lot of things you can do to progress the life of that dog, and keep it in really good condition. But so that would be an example. Bladder stones, cats that have a tendency to block, you want to make sure that you're feeding a diet that has the right pH level for whatever types of stones they have. They do a supersaturation test, which is really, if you think of a glass of iced tea, and you want to sweeten it, so you put a packet of sugar in there and you stir it, and it totally dissolves in the glass. Then you add another packet and it still dissolves, but it's getting a little cloudy, and then you put another one in, and then it dissipates out to the bottom. That's kind of like a bladder stone. Some of those
Mm-hmm.
stones, some of those crystals will form
Yeah.
stones. And
Right.
so
Right.
you want to make sure that you feed a diet that's going to prevent that kind of happening, because they're just, genetically stone formers. Or it could be the way the diet was formulated. Sometimes, in the old, not so much nowadays, but years ago, they weren't formulated so that, maybe the pH ranges were so extreme that it would cause them to form stones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
But
so I'm going to
And what?
confess. I'm going to
What?
confess one of Libby's sins. I
What?
was filling the cat food container, which I now know not to
Oh.
do that, and she
Yeah.
got it was
Yeah.
like, picture like a faucet, and her mouth is going. Nang, 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 nang,
They
eating
also
it.
like from the cat box. They like the digested cat food too.
Oh, that we call those cat hors d'oeuvres.
Because you know why? Because it's higher in protein and higher in fat.
the
Well, we
cat
don't let
food
her,
is,
but
yeah.
but is
Yeah.
it okay, like once in a while, if like the dog gets some of that cat food, it's not going to hurt her.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not making a steady diet out of it, but
No,
it is
Yeah.
higher in
okay.
fat. But I mean, those kind of things. I had a cat. I had somebody that had a cat that was. Remember, we had fish and potatoes was a prescription
Yes.
allergenic
My
diet.
favorite
I
diet.
used
Yeah,
that
and
with our old one. It's the worst breath.
Yeah.
well, it's fish.
But your cat liked the fish and potato one? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that their cat would go over and eat it. But there's certain things that cats needs that are not, like dogs can.
Right.
They can formulate them themselves with the amino acids in their diets that cats can't. So
Right.
you
Right.
don't want it to be a steady diet. But if it's snacks, I don't think it's going to be that harmful.
So
And when
Karen,
you're
go ahead.
when you're looking at, like, Janet's dog had surgery because it was hit by a car. She's got a golden rescue, of which we're going to get Karen a golden rescue
Yeah.
in a few months. But so she's got it on glucosamine chondroitin. But what about a mobility diet?
Well, the nice thing about a mobility diet is they put that in the diet. So think of yourself. Like, do you remember to take your vitamins every day? I have those little containers all over, but sometimes you miss. When you've got it
Yeah.
in the formula, you know that they're getting that consistent amount day in and day out. So you do see
Yeah.
pets do much better when it's in the diet. At least that's what what people say is like, oh my gosh, my dog jumped on the bed. He hasn't jumped on the bed
Yeah.
in a month, because they're getting it consistently. If you run out of that, do you actually, do you always get it on
Yeah.
time? Those kind of things,
Right.
So I do like feeding it in the diet. Even like the fatty acids, having the
Yeah,
fatty
that was
acids
my
in the
next question.
diet,
Right.
you can
Right.
control the ratio, and then that they're getting the proper amount of omega-3s to omega-6s.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it because we
That's so
talked earlier,
convenient.
Janet and I were talking about supplements earlier, and you give fish oil capsules, and a lot of times these dogs will get diarrhea or belch from it. So, you have the fatty acids in the diet. First of all, they're absorbed much better, and then you don't get the consequent diarrhea and belching because it's in the food and it's already, I want to say pre-digested. That's not the right word, but you know what
No,
I'm
but
saying.
it's in there, and they're getting in every kibble. They're getting the right
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we have a system in the King household because Libby could get an Academy Award acting like she hasn't been fed. Poor pitiful Pearl looking at you. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
it's actually a Sanibel shell, Alice, and it says she has been fed written on it. And we
Oh.
put that on the counter. We put it on the island. So it's like message, no matter what she does or tells you.
I see she gets up there and switches it around.
No, it moves from the It moves from the window by
Oh,
the
up and
sink
down.
to the
Okay.
island. It has to be physically moved.
Gotcha.
But one other
Okay.
funny Libby story.
Got
So
it.
we sort the laundry. It's in the laundry room, which is off the kitchen, and it's like in piles on the floor. And last night I'm doing laundry, and she's looking at me, and sometimes she'll like take a sock and kind of go like this. Well,
Yeah.
she was going like, that playful look,
Yeah.
and she grabbed a pair of Donald's boxers and went flying around the corner like, "Come get me!"
No way.
No.
No way would I come get her with those.
So I went in and I did one of these. I stood there like this, and she's got it between her paws, and it's like, ha ha. Like she just wanted to have some fun.
Okay, now listen. This is
What?
the most important question.
Yeah, this is a big one.
wanna ask
Wait, give her a
Karen.
minute.
Uh-oh.
Okay, give you a minute. We want to ask Karen, what is your pet peeve? Or
Pet
a
owner
pet
or
peeve?
pet peeve?
Yeah, anything you want. Get it off your chest.
Okay.
This is it.
Yeah, this is it.
As being a road warrior in sales for so many years,
Yeah.
most of my pet peeves come around drivers. And I have two that are they really get me going.
Wait.
is
It's
people
one
that-
per customer. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, go, no.
All right. I was going to give you the
No,
choice.
two. You get
but
two. You get two because you're special.
Okay.
One is people that drive in the left lane, the passing lane, and don't move over. So, it starts the weaving effect of all the people that want to get around them. That really drives
Okay,
me nuts.
that would be our older sister setting the pace for safety, driving 45 in the left lane.
She
Just
got
saying.
a ticket for going too slow.
She got
Go
pulled
ahead.
over.
Well, I've always looked for somebody to give somebody a ticket like that. And the other
did.
one
That
is
was
people
20
that
years
drive
ago.
these beautiful, fancy cars, and they don't get the signal option. They
Oh.
just don't they
they
don't
don't
get that
have
option
to.
on the car.
You mean the clicker,
Yeah.
the blinker? Well, you don't have to when you reach a certain
Yeah.
level. You don't. It's not required anymore.
It's not mandatory.
Okay, but I have to tell you this story about my husband. The other day, I don't know, I went somewhere and he picked me up in the golf cart. So it was Chico's because I went to return those pants, Karen. So we go out. There's the golf cart parked there with the turn signal still going.
Geezer.
Busted. Okay, well, listen, I know Karen's busy, so we got to wrap it up. We can't thank you enough. We want to have you on again because we know we're going to get tons of questions. I've learned so much. And Janet, you asked a lot of questions that I totally forgot to ask because, I don't know, I just haven't thought about it. So I learned from even her. She's gone. Okay.
She's out of here. Well, thank you so much. It was fun. It really was. Sorry
That was
about
fun.
the distractions. My husband's like, I'm like, get out of the kitchen.
At least he had clothes on.
Yeah, well.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. We hope you found the science-based information provided helpful in taking care of your pet. Check out our other Speaking of Pets episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
We'd love to hear from you. So email your pet photos and or pet peeves to contact@speakingofpetspod.com. Remember to follow Speaking of Pets on all social media.